Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast here on this Wednesday, September 18th edition. Coming at you, it's Oklahoma week, people. So we got a lot to talk about today here on the Press Pass as Tennessee gets their first really big test this season. Maybe not first true test, as I still do think NC State was a test in some sort, but Oklahoma certainly the first big test for Tennessee, first conference game. So a ton to break down doing our full Oklahoma preview. I got Rick Butler and Ryan Shepard with me today, as always. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Jack. It's good to be here back with you on the show. I'm getting that game week feeling, getting a little bit of antsiness when I woke up this morning. So I'm thrilled to be sitting here and talking about this game with you guys. I got all my stuff. I got my notes, right? I got my muscle milk so I can have my protein. I got my Sour Patch Bites so I can have a little bit of sugar. I mean, I'm ready. I'm locked in for an Oklahoma football preview if I've ever been locked in for one. So happy to see you guys ready to roll.
Much more prepared than I have to say. Ryan, how about you? How you doing?
I'm not as prepared either. I'm good. I guess a few things I'm good. First, I'll go with my prepared line is that I won both of the friendly wagers from last week. The mighty Brentwood Bruins went into Henry County and earned us just a heck of an offensive football game, a 7-6 victory. And then two, Oregon absolutely annihilated Oregon State. Absolutely just demolished them.
Okay, yeah, let's time out a second on that. That was really in the second half when they got going. It was an 8-point game.
Well, I forgot football games were played for 60 minutes. That's my fault.
And in my defense,
you've been watching too much Tennessee football, Ryan.
Yeah. And in my defense, like, I knew when we had this discussion that game was in the afternoon, but if it would have been at night, completely different story. So that's the only reason.
That's a Chase Thomas take right there. If I've ever heard.
And the Henry County game, it was the 7-6 final. Brentwood wins in Patriot Stadium in Paris. Henry County didn't kick 2 field goals. They scored a touchdown, but when they didn't get it. So I gotta respect the guts of the call because I mean, it's such a low scoring game. Why not try to steal one? So they fought. That's all that matters.
And my sources on the game also tell me that Henry County got the ball. Just to show how nasty of a game this was. Henry County got the ball back with like 50 seconds on maybe their own 30-yard line, something like that, and lost like 25 yards on the drive. Immediately snapped the ball over the quarterback's head on like the first or second play. So some classic high school football stuff. And then the other thing
that I was going to say,
guy.
Yes,
Kent State should get about anybody that can snap the ball decently. The other thing that made me laugh literally right as we were starting to record, I was just pulling up Oklahoma's football's ESPN page, and the first thing that comes up is Feinbaum, Vols ticket fee, quote, utterly disgraceful. And that was giving me a nice chuckle to start the podcast.
Feinbaum
talk about something that nobody has cared about, nobody's had an opinion about, everyone's just kind of let that story fly underneath the radar the last 24 hours or so.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys have a take on this, Ryan? I know y'all obviously written about it on RockyTopInsider.com. Can see all the info there, but do you have a take on this at all?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me feel bad for making fun of corporate sponsors because certainly corporate sponsors, unless you're renaming stuff, is better than flipping the bill to the fans. But I don't think Tennessee's going to be alone in this. They're one of the first ones. I know Georgia announced ticket price increases. I'm not sure what the percentage was a couple weeks ago heading into next season, but I don't think Tennessee's going to be the only one that ends up doing this. So, well, obviously I think 10% is supposed to go to the players, 4.5% for whatever else, 14.5% total. And obviously with the House case, it looks like these athletic departments are going to need more and more money. And certainly Tennessee, when you just look at the Neyland Stadium construction, Lindsey Nelson Stadium construction, Anderson Training Facility, I don't know what they're calling the stuff they're building where G10 is, whatever. I don't know what all that's called, but all of that, they have a lot of they have a lot of construction projects right now that going to cost a lot of money on top of potentially having to give out more scholarships and pay players. So it's not necessarily shocking by any means.
Yeah, I'm with Ryan. Sorry to cut you off there. My thing with it is that it was hard for me to put myself in those shoes of a season ticket holder, just because, I'm not buying that ticket. I don't know what that exact 10% would look like. I never want, you never want that to go to the fans, but I think there also is this 30,000 foot view approach of it, of, saying, hey, well, the fans have really enjoyed what Danny White's been doing here in Knoxville the last couple of years. There's been a lot more optimism. There's been a lot more praise about what Danny White's been doing. But at the end of the day, Danny White is a businessman. This is what he does. He finds ways to make money for the university, to make money for the athletics department. It's not a guy who was a former football coach. It's not a guy who came over from, rebuilding a different kind of football program necessarily, but he's a businessman true and true. So there's a lot of positive praise towards Danny White over the last couple of years about how much people have enjoyed some of the things he's done for the programs. But at the same time, again, he's a businessman, so he's going to be looking for these revenue streams, and they've certainly found one in this. I completely agree with Ryan that I think this is a copycat league for a number of different reasons, and that other schools and other programs are going to start doing this as well. But I think we're at a point in time right now where Tennessee, no matter if it's, and maybe a lawsuit against the NCAA, no matter if it's sort of a revenue income from the fans and ticket pricing, I think that Tennessee is doing a lot of things to sort of chart these course these uncharted waters, if you will. That's what I was trying to get. And so I think that Tennessee is going to be at the forefront of a lot of stuff like this right now. But hey, Danny White's a businessman. You can love what he's doing, but you got to know at the end of the day, he's a businessman, and he's going to find ways to get money in the program.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean this in a wrong way, but this is on brand for Danny White. Like, this was not a surprise,
Yeah.
So, I didn't have a strong opinion on it. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Probably a good chance that was happening before the news broke. And you're right, Rick. It's tough to put yourself in those shoes as someone who's always in the press box. But yeah, it has an impact. But like you said, it feels like the response hasn't been overwhelmingly negative or anything like that. So people get it.
And just one more thought on that too. Like I especially feel for the people who maybe have been, scraping together their money to be able to get those season tickets, something that was maybe grandfathered in, and they want to keep some sort of tradition. But I also think you look at it in a realistic point of view, and you say that a lot of these season ticket holders are maybe wealthier individuals, and they might have the ability to just kind of tack on that 10% fee. I imagine they're having a lot more fun watching games now than they were in 2019 as well. But again, then that kind of gets into a conversation of, making decisions for other people's money. And that's not what I'm about to do. But I do find it kind of fascinating. I feel bad for the people who are barely kind of keeping it together to keep their season tickets. But again, I think that Tennessee is going to sell the same amount, if not more, next year. And I feel pretty confident in that.
Right. Exactly. Tennessee bashes Kent State 71-0. I don't think we need to spend hardly any time on this game. You guys did a recap. You can find that on YouTube. It's also in our audio podcast feed, I believe. But yeah, it was just over from the jump. Absurd beatdown beyond anything that even not we expected. I mean, they could have scored 100 points if they wanted to. That was the reality. They completely let off the foot off the gas, asked if they wanted to do a running clock, right? Asked the Kent State coach if they want to do a running clock. Said no. But Tennessee lets the foot off the gas, doesn't score much in the second half, still wins 71-0. Kent State, what a horrible football team. That's my takeaway. What a just very, very horrible football team Ryan Kent State is. Terrible watch.
Yeah. No good, very bad, terrible. I mean, it's the funny thing, and the joke I was making of what we learned in that game was, Kent State's like 20 miles from Akron. That's their big rival, Akron. Well, Akron went to Starkville and beat quite literally walked the dog, walked the Bulldog. I mean, killed Mississippi State on Saturday night. An uncompetitive win. Oh, Toledo. Yes, that's what I meant. Toledo. Which I'm not sure if it's Toledo or Akron that it's outside. I'm going to have to look this up now. I'm not sure. But whatever. They're both MAC opponents.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just feel very confident that Toledo is going to beat Kent State and Tennessee is going to beat Mississippi State after watching those two games.
Fair assumption.
Yes. Good picks.
Anything you learned about Tennessee, Rick, from that game? Any sort of takeaway you had? For me, it's Gaston Moore looking that good after maybe not looking great against Chattanooga.
Yeah, certainly a couple of pleasant surprises. I would say that I was going to answer your question with a pretty resounding no, but you're right. There's a couple of young players I think we got to see. Gaston Moore's not a young player by any stretch of the imagination, but he is a more inexperienced player just when it comes to on-field games. So I thought some of the throws that he made were impressive. You can tell that, hey, this is a guy who's been working with his receivers for years as well. You can see some of that chemistry. Ryan will probably be able to dive in more a little bit about this, but I think that there were some interesting wide receiver rotations. Don't know about how that'll impact things for this week coming up, but certainly that might be a takeaway. But otherwise, it was just a beatdown. It was what you said. It was Tennessee being able to name their score. It was Tennessee being able to find the end zone whenever they wanted to. And their version of letting up the dogs was still Gaston Moore scoring 2 touchdowns before the half was over. So I think besides a couple of young players that you got to see, Idris Farouk for maybe way later down the road, you get to empty the bench. You get to give your starters a little bit of rest. Things are going to be good.
Well, I'll bring up Gaston Moore because the backup quarterback can instantly become one of the most important positions on the team. For
no doubt. Look at Texas.
National championship contender. Exactly. Look at Texas. Arch Manning looks great. You look beyond playoff contenders. Tennessee just played NC State. Grayson McCall's hurt now. They're having to start a backup quarterback with their season kind of in limbo, obviously. So entering conference play. So backup quarterback, really important position. And then Gaston Moore not, completing every pass, almost 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thought it was encouraging. Yes, against Kent State, but given what he did against Chattanooga, I thought it was a good bounce back.
For sure. I really, more than anything, I just wish we got to see more of him. He only played 2 drives. I wish that he'd gotten a 3rd or 4th drive, but at the same time, I mean, that was the most we've ever seen Josh Heupel call off the dogs. I mean, I think Tennessee had 3 total possessions in the second half. Yeah. I mean, they were going slow. They were not running with tempo. They were just trying to get the game over with, essentially. So I get why it didn't end up happening. But yeah, he looked really good. I think the way, I don't know if it's a takeaway as much as just a really interesting note, was how early Mike Matthews played. I think it'll be curious to see if he is a guy that's in the rotation. I mean, Tennessee went to that 10 personnel set on the second drive, so it wasn't just straight up what they normally do. But I mean, he was in the game before Chris Brazell was on Saturday, so it's not necessarily that I expect that to be the case moving forward. But Jack, I know what you just saw. This is
Holy cow!
Yeah, Woj.
Woj just retired.
Woj, good for
Woj. Bomb on his own retirement.
Oh my!
Woj got out of what has to be truly a miserable job of breaking news 24/7, and he's just going to go work at the basketball program of his alma mater. What a king move by Woj.
Where's he going to go?
St. Bonaventure, his alma mater. He's going to be the general manager for the basketball program.
So Shams now has the monopoly. Shams now has the monopoly on breaking news
for the time. Yeah, for the time being, at least.
Oh, who's going to be next? Who's going to rival Shams?
Maybe Schefter. Maybe Schefter has to go basketball mode for a little bit.
Oh,
I wouldn't be surprised. ESPN's going to have somebody. Maybe for the time being, it's Adam Schefter.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Maybe Jeff Darlington.
He's everywhere. He's the night crawler of.
I just see that. I just see that guy around. I just remember that guy from Scotty Scheffler's arrest.
And Tyreek Hill.
You guys,
that's right. He was there.
Which movie? Jack?
Nightcrawler.
No.
Okay.
Oh, the X-Man.
It's Jake Gyllenhaal. He takes photos of crime scenes, but to ensure he's first on the scene and that his work is the most important, he starts creating crime scenes, causing them, and becomes a criminal so he can take pictures and become the first on the scene. And people were calling Jeff Darlington the Nightcrawler of sports media because suddenly he's at all of these events before anyone, and he's there every time. Anyway,
that's fantastic.
A little funny side note. But yeah, wow, Woj bomb for real. And yes, Kent State bad, Tennessee good, case closed. Let's move on to the big matchup this weekend. And before we dive into a couple of keys, going to play some fill in the blank on it too. Rick, I just want to first talk about the narrative that is going to be on all the ESPN shows this week, and that's Josh Heupel returning to Norman. Certainly a big part of this matchup this weekend between Tennessee and Oklahoma. First time for Heupel returning to Norman, coaching on the opposing sideline. He's had some funny quotes about it so far this week, talking about how the Oklahoma fans are certainly going to be quiet while the Tennessee offense is on the field out of respect, right? Of course, he knows that's false. But How important, Rick, do you think this is for Josh Heupel going to Oklahoma, and getting a win? How important do you think that is just for Josh and himself?
Yeah, I think personally, it's got to be a storyline that's maybe sort of bubbling up within inside him, though. But at the same time, I do think that Josh Heupel is a guy that understands that Tennessee has bigger goals on the horizon than just winning in Norman, Oklahoma this weekend. So I think he understands that there's a bigger conversation to be had just about the state of the team. But I can't imagine how somebody doesn't have those own personal feelings. One of the players talked about it yesterday. I can't remember who, but they said that, hey, Josh has not mentioned Oklahoma yet this week. Josh has not mentioned, some of his old playing days or things like that, or certain storylines that are going to go on. So I think that maybe personally there's something going on there, but I also think that this is a Tennessee team that really does believe in the motto of every week is game week and every week is a new week. You don't worry about the past. You don't worry about the present or the future. That being said, though, I think this is the biggest Oklahoma home football game in 10 to 15 years. I don't have my exact history down for OU football, but at least a decade, this is the biggest game. This is not only their SEC opener, which would have made it a big game in its own right, but this is the homecoming, the return of somebody who is royalty for the Sooners, and that is Josh Heupel, despite the little bit of bad situation that might have happened in the mid-2010s. So I think this is a colossal game. I think it's going to be one of the most rowdy and passionate fan bases you will see across the college football landscape this year. I think that the night game only encourages that sort of activity from fans. So certainly Josh Heupel keeping those emotions at check a little bit throughout the week. But I think that this is going to be the biggest Oklahoma football game in 10 to 15 years. And not even, that's not trying to say that they have a big – this is an SEC opener. It's the return of a former national champion. There's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, Ryan, how much stock do you put into this narrative of Josh having pressure to win at Oklahoma and just all of this surrounding the game that's not necessarily about what's going to happen on the field?
I mean, I think it's all valid, but it's kind of what I talk about with bulletin board material all the time. Like people last year who thought, since there was so much extra motivation for Missouri to beat Tennessee or to run it up on Tennessee because Tennessee scored that late touchdown the year before. I'm sure Eli Drinkwitz didn't like that, and I'm sure that, made him want to win more due to stand-on business thing or whatever. But he would have wanted to win the game either way, and there's only a certain amount of wanting to win a game badly enough. Eventually, that's great for the opening kickoff in the first play of the game. After that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Tennessee's going to be motivated to win this game because if they want to achieve the things that they have said they want to achieve this season, this is a game they need to win. And Josh Heupel is an ultra competitive guy. So I think would want to win this game extremely badly if this is what they were playing at LSU on Saturday. Is there a little bit of an extra chip on his shoulder, an extra gear in this game? Absolutely. I'm sure there is. And I bet if Tennessee wins this game on Saturday, I bet the Tennessee players talking to the media after the game will talk a lot about how they did it for Josh and probably throw some shots at Oklahoma for firing him. I think all that would happen if Tennessee wins. But at the end of the day, I don't think that is going to have really anything to do with what happens in this game, who wins the game. I don't think the extra motivation is going to have any sort of factor on who ends up winning.
We're so Tennessee-centric, so we look at everything from a Tennessee point of view, but I almost think that I do think now that I've thought about it a couple of days that the pressure's more on Oklahoma because it's in Norman. You let Josh Heupel go years ago. He's coming back. It's time to defend first SEC game. Like it's more important for Oklahoma, I would think, with this whole narrative to win than Heupel. And maybe I feel like most would disagree with me, but I don't know, man. It's like if Tennessee loses close, it's in Norman, tough place to play, good team. I mean, the road is what makes my belief what it is, just because it's in Norman. But Tennessee will be able to rebound, just beat Alabama, you're fine. Whereas with Oklahoma, if Tennessee goes in there and dominates, it's like, man, that's tough, and you're really behind the 8 ball in the SEC to start after already kind of looking disappointing the first couple of games of the season. I almost feel like the pressure's more on Oklahoma, Rick.
That's an interesting thought, and certainly I'd like to hear Ryan's thought as well. To me, I kind of think of it as maybe on game day, maybe coming up on Saturday and leading into the game, maybe that's when Oklahoma feels some of that pressure of, hey, we're one of our former guys is coming back into town. We got to defend our home territory. We can't give up our home turf. But I do think that in the long term, I think more of the pressure does sit with Tennessee, because I think that they're just expected to be the better team in the college football landscape as a whole. I think these first couple of weeks of the season has kind of showed analysts and fans and just college football spectators that, hey, Tennessee was projected to be a good team in the year, but now they might start looking a little bit like what has made them good in the past, right? Maybe they're looking a little bit better than people projected. So I actually think that you're not entirely wrong on your thought at all. I think that on game day, when the fans are in the stadium, when they remember the passes that Josh Heupel was making in that stadium, maybe there is a lot more pressure to kind of feel that sense of, hey, we cannot give this up. This is our turf. We cannot give this up to somebody who's coming in and trying to take it from us. But I think that Tennessee is the better team on the whole this year. I think that Tennessee has the better chance at being competitive later on during the winter. So I think that long-term the pressure lies with Tennessee, but maybe you're right. Maybe on game day, maybe some of those emotions do start swirling up and they're feeling like they have to have this pressure to not let Josh Heupel come back into his old stadium and kind of run the table with Tennessee.
I agree with Rick. I'd phrase it a little differently where I think, yes, Jack, from a narrative standpoint, it's
Right.
more important for Oklahoma
Yes.
to win this game. And not just because they fired Josh Heupel, but because Josh Heupel wasn't a serious candidate when they hired Brent Venables. I mean, it sounded like Bob Stoops wasn't going to allow that to happen. And here we are 3 years in. It does not seem like Brent Venables is doing a great job. Not that he's been horrible, but Oklahoma, and everybody 2 years ago or 3 years ago, which is, I guess, the season before Lincoln Riley left and Brent Venables took over, and Oklahoma and Texas are joining the SEC. All the thought was, yeah, Oklahoma will probably be fine, and they'll be able to compete in the SEC. Texas, they're going to struggle. Well, it's completely opposite. Texas is as good as any team in the SEC this season, and Oklahoma looks like a team that's going to go 7-5 this season and is really going to struggle. So, from the standpoint that Josh Heupel was never a serious candidate to replace Lincoln Riley, and the guy that they did choose has not done a particularly good job. And then from the standpoint, and I know this is just one clip, one podcast of some fans. Maybe this isn't how all Oklahoma fans feel, but I think it was, I don't know what the podcast was, so I'm not going to name it, but the fans, it was like, I've always said if an Oklahoma coach loses to Josh Heupel, he deserves to be fired. To me, it has some like Tennessee basketball towards Conzo Martin vibes, where it's like Oklahoma fans don't respect Josh Heupel. They don't think Josh Heupel's a good football coach. I mean, they respect him for what he did at Oklahoma, but they do not think Josh Heupel's a good football coach. And obviously, if Tennessee comes in and wins this game and they feel like they're cruising to a big time season, well, they're just going to look really dumb and look not validated in that take. But to Rick's point, I think when you talk about this season, there's more pressure on Tennessee because of what I just said. You look at Oklahoma's schedule, 8-4 is the ceiling. Oklahoma's not going to do anything special this year, whereas Tennessee is the favorite in this game. And if they win this game, you just start looking at a schedule. It's really, really hard to see a path to Tennessee not making the college football playoff if they win this game. They're going to have to drop a game that they really shouldn't for that to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely narrative based for the pressure being on Oklahoma, because you're right. The ceilings are drastically different for Tennessee and Oklahoma. If Oklahoma wins this game, I still don't think they're going to make the college football playoff. But of course, the pressure lies on Tennessee for this season and what they'll be able to accomplish. But the narrative may be a different story. Rick, when we talk about keys of the game, there's a lot, I'm sure, but your top key of the game, what do you got?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of, and maybe this kind of opens up a conversation, but one of the things that I'm looking forward to, looking for coming up this Saturday is, how is this Oklahoma offense going to attack Tennessee's defense? I think in these first three games, we've seen that Tennessee's defensive line is a force to be reckoned with. They've done a very good job of getting after the quarterback. Now, have the sack numbers necessarily been there? Have all the tackle for loss numbers necessarily been there? No, and that's something that people are trying to criticize Tennessee about. But the fact of the matter is that all of these offenses see what Tennessee has on the defensive line. They see what's coming after their quarterback when the ball is snapped, and they're trying to get the ball out quickly, whether that's with a run or a screen pass or a pop pass or a bubble pass or a slant, something to get the ball moving quickly. My question is Oklahoma going to do one of those similar types of game plans? Or are they going to trust their offensive line, which is a little bit banged up, and are they going to try to fortify the trenches a little bit more, give Jackson Arnold some time to pass? the other thing about that is that you've got to be able to contain Jackson Arnold. He is their top rusher right now, I believe, on the season so far. So while that does speak a little bit to their run game and how that's not been as productive as they might would have liked, it does say that Jackson Arnold is a dual threat kind of guy, especially last week. I believe he ran for about 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I'm looking at this defensive line. Just how is Oklahoma's offense going to attack it? Are they going to use a little bit more of their traditional game plan? Or are they going to say, hey, look, we know that we have a couple of freight trains barreling down on us the second we snap the ball. We need to get the ball out quick. We need to keep this ball moving. We need to keep advancing down the field. So that's certainly one of the things that I'm looking at, just considering how opponents have played offense against Tennessee's front so far. But then I think you can find some offensive things as well. But I'll kind of just leave it there to open up the conversation. But one of the big things I'm looking for is just how is this Oklahoma offense going to attack this Tennessee defense when we know that the pressure is one of the strengths of the front seven. So really excited to see that, and I think that'll play a big key into the final result of this game.
I'll actually piggyback off of Rick's real quick, Ryan, if you don't mind, because my key is very similar to what Rick said. It's quarterback run. It's Jackson Arnold's legs. It's stopping that for me is the key for Tennessee. How many times has Tennessee been burned by a quarterback running all over them in the past couple of years? You think about Matt Corral, obviously, a couple of years ago, Brady Cook last year. There's been countless times.
Most Florida quarterbacks.
Yeah, on scrambles, not necessarily designed quarterback runs, but on scrambles, back-breaking third down conversions. That's what's killed Tennessee's defense a lot. So I think the pass rush is going to give Jackson Arnold no time. But if Jackson Arnold is able to escape and able to scramble and, tackling on the second level isn't great, secondary tackling isn't great, then it could be rough. So to me, that's the key for Tennessee's defense, stopping Jackson Arnold from scrambling, picking up key first downs in big moments, because I do think Tennessee's defense will be able to mostly shut down this Oklahoma offense, but you can't necessarily bet on those scramble plays, completely stopping those, because those are improvisations. Of course, Jackson Arnold can do that. We saw it last week. So that's what I look to, Ryan.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of the things that I was going to note. And it's what you specifically said, too. I mean, Jackson Arnold leads Oklahoma in rushing, and it's not like it's been a lot of design quarterback runs. Most of that damage he's done has been on scrambling. And when you consider the fact that it's college football and sacks count as rushing yards, he's gotten sacked 8 or 9 times this season already.
Yeah.
So when you actually think about the net yard or the yards pure gained on quarterback scrambles, it's a lot. So I think that's a good one. To me, it's just for Tennessee not to turn the ball over, I guess. I could say win the turnover battle. I don't think it's necessarily even that. It's just not to have a lot of turnovers. Don't give Oklahoma short fields. Nico not make a lot of mistakes because of what y'all said. I just have a hard time thinking Oklahoma's going to be able to move the ball a ton on Tennessee and sustain a bunch of drives. And Tennessee's defense under Tim Banks just in general has not given up a lot of big plays. Oklahoma's offense has not shown an ability to have a lot of big plays so far this season. So I think if Tennessee can avoid making a lot of mistakes offensively, turning the ball over, whether that be fumbles or Nico making some bad decisions, I just think Tennessee is going to be able to win this game. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it later, but just the more I look at this game, the paths to victory, there's just, not that there aren't any, but there are just few to me for Oklahoma. And the main ones are Tennessee's offense making mistakes and especially Nico making mistakes.
Yeah. Hey, I want to follow up on one of the offensive things that you said, because I completely agree. I know that we've all been enamored with Nico Iamaleava so far. I know that there's a lot of people in the college football world that's kind of anointed him as one of the top quarterbacks in college football. And I think that is true, especially to an extent. But at the same time, it's a redshirt freshman going to make his true first start in a game where it's at a stadium where it's probably never going to be more rowdy under the lights. And again, the last 10 to 15 years. So I think that Nico Iamaleava has to be good. I think that, though, saying that also goes on Josh Heupel and his play calling. That also goes on Dylan Sampson and his running. That's giving Nico the weapons, the resources, the abilities to make that offense go down. But one of the big keys to the game that I really think could hinder Tennessee is, especially early in the game, if he gets stuck on drives. If you get into those third and longs, I think that's when you give Brent Venables all the ability in the world to dial up his defenses. If you're in a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and you give Brent Venables the idea or the ability to say, all right, now you're in my territory, right? Now we can maybe disguise something. Now we can bring something different. Oklahoma is a team that likes to bring pressure, and they're good at bringing pressure. That's when they're going to be able to dial that up as well. So I think a big key to this game, just for Tennessee to continue moving the ball with the pace that they want to, is not to get in those third and longs. I know that is just a college football a football idea in general, right? No NFL team wants to say, oh, we love playing from 3rd and 8. Everybody wants to not be playing from behind the sticks. But at the same time, I just think that, hey, there's not too many places where I give Oklahoma an advantage in this game. I think that defensive coaching, maybe not in direct comparison to Tennessee, but I think that it is a significant advantage for this Oklahoma defense. Do not allow Brent Venables to sit there and to be able to dial up his defense throughout the whole game if you're on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, things like that. So I think those early downs are going to be really critical for this Tennessee offense, just getting a couple yards, moving the ball, getting it closer to the sticks, and then seeing what you can do from there. Jack, you're
my bad. I was going to say, going back to what Ryan was saying earlier, sorry if you mentioned this, but Oklahoma tied for 2nd in the nation in turnover margin. So
yeah,
about Nico potentially turning it over. Yes, he had 2 picks against NC State. Only one was his fault. I think that's a storyline to watch as well, and just how composed he can be. Ryan, what's your confidence level on a scale of 1 to 10 that Nico plays a relatively clean game in Norman?
It's a good question. Like 7. I mean, confident. It's just kind of hard to say because you haven't seen him play at many games like this, and you haven't seen him play on the road at all. So I would say 7. I do think it's a different environment and a different game, but like what he did against Iowa, I think more than anything gives me optimism. And man, it's hard to say just because it just feels too disrespectful to Oklahoma. But this game has a lesser version vibe of that game where I just think even if Tennessee's offense isn't great, if they just don't make a bunch of mistakes, they're going to be able to win. And that was to the nth degree what it felt like in Nico's first start against Iowa. And while he didn't light up the stat sheet, he avoided making those mistakes in that game. So I would agree with that. And I think what Rick said, I mean, that's going to be important for him being in spots where he doesn't make mistakes is winning first and second down, or at least not just staying behind the sticks. And I'll flip it to the other side too. And this is just classic. I mean, it's something we could say about a lot of Tennessee games this year, and certainly it's been the case against Kentucky in 21 and 23. Getting off the field on 3rd down for Tennessee's defense is big because I think Oklahoma just having long drives and being able to shorten the game. So being able to shorten the game is always something you talk about when you're talking about a team, what needs to happen for them to pull an upset. And I think it's no different in this game. So, and then that goes hand in hand with the quarterback scrambles. It goes hand in hand with being able to contain Jackson Arnold. But that's for Tennessee's defense, that's to me one of the big things.
And then, Jack, just to kind of add one more thing to the question that you asked there, I think that Josh Heupel is going to be really important to Nico Iamaleava's play this Saturday. I think that just getting him in position, making the right play calls, but he's also got to be smart in the RPOs as well. We know that from Monday Night Football that Peyton Manning does not like the RPOs. He was very adamant in saying that he didn't like them. But we know that Josh Heupel and Nico Iamaleava, they do like those. So I think that play calling is going to – yes, the weight of the world is going to be on Nico's shoulders as he tries to win this game for Tennessee, but I think that play calling can do a lot to kind of take that weight off of his shoulders, and it comes from Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley.
Also on 3rd downs, Tennessee wasn't great defensively on 3rd downs against NC State in that first half, really that first quarter, early on.
First drive.
First drive, first couple drives. They were struggling on 3rd down. So
that's a great point as well. One that I didn't even think about was, hey, if you're Tennessee's defense, you feel like you've probably gained a lot of confidence through these first 12 quarters of the season so far. But look back at that first drive against North Carolina State and kind of realize that, hey, what do we need to do differently so that we don't have a team just, walking it down the field on us? Yeah. That's really one of the most vulnerable positions that Tennessee's defense has been in this year. And maybe they can take a big learning takeaway from it.
But I think that's also just like the way Tennessee defense plays under Tim Banks. Is they'll give you the short stuff. So it's finding the balance in that of not wanting to give up the big plays while being able to take away some of that stuff and because typically a lot of zone defense, especially on 3rd downs for Tennessee. So that's always to me a balancing act. And why some teams have been able to do what Kentucky has done and just stayed in front of the sticks and won on third and intermediate, third and short against Tennessee's defense and had a lot of success.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, let's play some fill in the blank. Tennessee blows out Oklahoma on the road if blank.
Its passing game is effective and crisp. If Tennessee passes the ball well, I just have a hard time seeing them lose this game. And I think that's what's the unknown about this game, I guess, is Tennessee hasn't had to beat anyone at all through the air this year to have success offensively. They could have lined up and ran it every single play the first 3 games, and they would have scored 40 points in all 3 of those games. So it's a different area they're in. I think they're going to have to throw the ball successfully to score 30 points in this game, because I think Oklahoma's run defense is really good. Not to say that Tennessee will just not be able to run the ball at all. I don't think that's the case, but they're going to have to make plays through the air, and Nico is going to have to drive Tennessee's offense in a way they haven't had to so far. But if the passing game is crisp, if Tennessee can move the ball through the air, if they can hit chunk plays through the air, I really think this game will be 2022 LSU.
Good comp, Rick. Tennessee blows out the Sooners if blank.
Yeah, my original answer for this question was Tennessee blows out Oklahoma if Josh Heupel settles in, if he finds a groove, if he finds his rhythm in the play calling, if he knows what his offense is working. I think to a lot of the points that Ryan just said. But to be a little bit different, to go to the other side of the ball, I'll say a similar sentence. I think Tennessee blows out Oklahoma if Rodney Garner locks in. This is a game where I think that Tennessee's defensive line can not only make an impact in the game, but can be a difference maker in this game. I see a situation where Tennessee's defensive line is wreaking havoc on that Oklahoma team throughout the game. Now, maybe not consistently throughout the whole game, but I think there will be key moments where this Tennessee D-line steps up and is able to make the plays that they need to. So whether that's just dialing up the right calls, whether that's getting the rotations in, I think if you see a position where maybe in the second quarter, maybe coming at a halftime, where you can just tell that Rodney Garner is in his bag, he's feeling it, he's got his players motivated, he's got his guys firing up, they're rotating nicely. I think that is an indication that Tennessee is doing something very, very, very well, and they're also keeping Oklahoma's offense at bay. Oklahoma's offense, again, it's battling some injuries. It's struggled at times this year. I think if you can do enough to kind of keep them off course, keep them off balanced, they're not going to do anything that, to me, just comes across as this could be a game-wrecking situation. So I think if Tennessee's defensive line can just handle their business, if they can control the kind of the tempo that goes on right there, I think that's a huge indication that Tennessee is really able to create a separation in the score.
So Ryan said the passing game is crisp. Rick said the defensive line dominates. Rodney Garner settles in. What's Tennessee's, top 2 strengths of their team? I would say quarterback, aerial attack, and defensive line being number 1. So really, it feels pretty simple. It feels like if Tennessee just plays their A game, they're going to roll them. Like, that's where I'm at. I agree. If Tennessee just plays their A game, like I just said, I don't see how Oklahoma wins, maybe even keeps it close.
Yes, to me, yes and no. I mean, I agree with your general thought there. They're like, yeah, if Tennessee plays their A game, I think they're going to win handedly. And that's where I don't necessarily agree with Rick's key, because I just don't see a world where that doesn't happen. I just don't see a world where Tennessee's defensive line doesn't control the game. Even, to me, it feels like the NC State game in that way, where it's just like Tennessee's defensive line is a lot better than Oklahoma's offensive line. And when you're there's not a whole lot of variance there when you're talking about line scrimmage.
Even that was a blowout still, though, because, that defensive line, it creates opportunities. But I completely see what you're saying. I didn't think of that originally.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're right, because there are degrees of that. If it's like NC State where they literally Oklahoma can't run the ball for a positive yard, it's really hard to see Tennessee losing, because Oklahoma's not going to be able to do anything offensively if you can't block it all up front. Where I would disagree is I would say Tennessee's passing game might be the strength of its team. To me, it's hard to say that the strength of its team. The way you said it, defensive line and quarterback play, those are streaks 1 and 2. Maybe on the quarterback. I mean, Tennessee's run the ball a lot better than they've thrown
Dylan
at this point in the season.
You could say, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's just, I don't know. There's an element of, I think Nico's good. And again, like I say all this, I think Nico is going to be good on Saturday night, and Tennessee's going to be able to throw the ball well enough to win. He still hasn't had to do it. And a lot of it was game plan. A lot of it was the way NC State was playing. Tennessee's passing game didn't do a whole lot in that game. Even last week, I didn't think Tennessee's passing game was particularly crisp. It hasn't been like it's just all gung-ho. There's been no issues. And some of it's pass protection, too. Pass protection hasn't been fantastic. Now, that's been a big problem, but it hasn't been fantastic. So when you talk about going into a game in that regard, it's going to be a greater test than Tennessee's seen it all this season, and Nico's seen it all in his career. There's some unknown there. Doesn't mean I don't think it can happen. Doesn't mean I don't even think it will happen. But to me, there's a lot more unknown with how Nico and the quarterback and Tennessee's passing game is going to be in this game, as opposed to the defensive line play.
I see what there's an expectation there's an expectation that Tennessee's defensive line is going to be, an impactful, game wrecker. I think I see what you're saying now. That all makes sense.
Yeah, there's an expectation for both. Nico should be able to show up and play a good game. Like, that's why he has hype. So there's expectation for both. There's expectation for his offense to play well.
Yeah, I guess I would say, too, the other big difference is Oklahoma's offensive line is bad and Oklahoma's defense is good. So there's going to be a lot more resistance that Nico is going to. Nico's going to be facing a much better group than Tennessee's defensive line is in this game.
Yeah, Oklahoma tied for 113th in the nation in sacks allowed per game with 3. They've allowed 9 sacks.
Can't run the ball at all. It's bad. It's a bad offense. It's a bad offense. I was going to say bad offensive line. It's a bad offense, period.
If you're allowing 3 sacks a game to Temple, Houston, and Tulane, watch out. Tennessee's coming to town, and it's going to get ugly. So
one other thing I'll say from a Keys standpoint, or just something I'm watching, I guess would be more accurate. It's supposed to be Rick. Rick's going to be there. I'm not going to be there. Rick's going to be our boots on the ground. Rick, I don't know if you checked the weather.
You're not going to Norman
Saturday.
Oh wow, I didn't know.
I have not checked the weather. What am I in store for?
Hot, upper 90s, like July, August heat.
Okay.
And I think there has been.
Me. I don't like rain. I don't like to bring my umbrella around. So it's okay. You're not an umbrella guy. In fact, you turn your nose to the umbrella, which is such a
I used to walk
a ridiculous, childish take, but
it's less that I turn my nose to the umbrella. This is from the Kentucky game last year. We're walking.
Yeah, it is.
And Ben McKee did more shaming
because I turned around to go get it.
We were like halfway to the stadium, and there was a chance it was going to rain. And Rick was like, "I have to go back to get the umbrella." And we're like, "What are you talking about? No, you don't." And Ben might have had some more choice words that we won't repeat on this podcast.
Yes.
But all that to say,
yes,
I've seen it kind of mentioned as to like advantage Oklahoma. It's going to be real hot. It's real hot in Oklahoma in the summer, which I'm not a weatherman. I'm not a meteorologist. I don't know the climate of Knoxville compared to Oklahoma. Maybe it does get a good bit hotter in Oklahoma than in the summer than it does in Knoxville.
Not as humid?
Probably. But my thing, and this is something I looked at, I was really interested at. Oklahoma's defensive line. They annihilated Temple, but then we're in competitive games each of the last 2 weeks where roughly speaking, against Houston and Tulane, Oklahoma's defensive linemen, at least their best defensive linemen, played like 50 snaps. It was like 44 and 50 snaps. To me, and where Tennessee's defensive line, and I'm sure they'll have to play more in this game probably, their top guys have been playing 20 snaps, even against NC State. And let's say they had to play 27 in this game. To me, that heat becomes an advantage for Tennessee because Tennessee has better depth along the defensive line. I don't know Oklahoma's roster in and out enough to say that Tennessee has better depth across the board, but I think they have better depth on the line of scrimmage, and I think they have good. We've talked about it all through the preseason and all through these first 3 weeks. They have good depth at spots. So to me, I think that I don't know if I'd go as far as saying the heat is an advantage for Tennessee, but the way I've seen it talked about is this is an advantage for Oklahoma. I would disagree with.
Yeah, good call.
Dejon Terry revenge game, by the way.
Oh,
that's right. I forgot.
The Wanya Morris Bowl.
Yeah.
The Eric Gray Bowl.
Eric Gray.
Wanya Morris scored a touchdown.
Yeah. Big man touchdown.
Key Lawrence
from your neck of the woods.
Yeah. Yep. Josh Heupel narrative. So what? Dejon Terry revenge game. Come on.
You might be right. You might be onto something here, Jack.
There was something there was something truly special about Dijon Terry transferring to say that he needed to go closer to home, which I do think like a family member was sick or something, so I don't want to make light of that. But then for him to transfer somewhere that was further from home than Knoxville was.
That's
Hilarious.
terrific.
I think we probably covered this with our keys. Just take the reverse. But real quickly, Ryan, Tennessee loses to Oklahoma if blank.
Nico's bad. They turned the ball over a bunch. Special teams mistakes, chunk plays for Oklahoma. Uncharacteristic things happen, or Nico's bad. To me, those are the two things.
Rick, do you echo that?
Yes, I do. This is actually the last big talking point that I have, and so if you will, just give me a quick second. You know, I think a lot of us feel really confident about this game for Tennessee, just sort of how Tennessee steps up to this game. There's a lot. Look, I've been following the media all week. There's a lot of people from the Knoxville area who are high on Tennessee heading into this game. My question for everyone, though, is are we quickly overlooking Tennessee's struggles against good teams in hostile environments over the last couple of years? My kind of Tennessee loses if is Oklahoma beats Tennessee if the Vols get rattled, if the Vols don't keep their composure. I think that's a big thing. Here's a text message that I want to read out to you guys. And I could put this in my own words, but I just think that this text was very well crafted. So I want to read it out to you guys. I think that there is a lot of truth here. And again, this is the final point that I don't just want to skip over because we've seen Tennessee outscore opponents, 190 to 12, whatever it is in the first 3 weeks. So here's what this text is. Quote, I hope some people in Knoxville talk about Josh Heupel and his offense on the road in hostile environments. Historically, it hasn't been the same. It's harder to communicate and play quickly. Also, it's Nico's first true road game. I do wonder if in-helmet communications will help. But the last 3 ranked road games, hostile environments for Tennessee. At Missouri, 7 points. At Alabama, 20 points. At Georgia, 13 points. And let's not forget the swamp last year, which was hostile, and Tennessee only scored 16 points. Yes, you have Kentucky in there, which I believe was hostile and a night game, but 4 out of the last 5 road games in hostile environments for UT has been a disaster. Obviously, we remember South Carolina 2 years ago as well, and it was a problem for Josh Heupel at Missouri. Just something I hope people look into and discuss before this game, and 100% the thing I'll be watching closest next week. How quick can they play? How clean is the operation? I think that's a great point. And I think that's kind of the last one of the just sort of these problems for Tennessee that has plagued Josh Heupel's offenses in the past. And that's if things don't sort of find a little bit of momentum, maybe communication breaks down. It's a Tennessee offense that doesn't look like what they normally look like, especially playing at home. So I do think that is I do think that that's a big storyline. I think that you can look at this Tennessee team and say that, okay, well, the games last year, and this was sort of my response to him, the game last year, I do believe are different than the ones this year and are a little bit different than the one from 2022 as well. Tennessee's offense just wasn't as capable as it was. You couldn't really rely on Joe Milton to go throw you the ball and win a game on the road and shut down a crowd while you do it. So I think that there is a little bit of difference with that. I think there's a little bit of leeway there. But there is still this overarching effect that, hey, Josh Heupel's teams against ranked teams, against teams with hostile environments, it has been a struggle at times. How does Tennessee sort of overcome that in this game in Norman on Saturday? I think that the in-helmet communication will help a little bit. But at the same time, Tennessee's got a lot of ways to get their plays in. They've done that for a couple years now. So that is a big thing I will be watching for. Maybe you guys have good examples of this. I don't know if there's going to be exactly tangible things I can, sort of forecast that I'll be watching for. But, I think there is this narrative. And I think that the narrative has been really easy for people to overlook this week because it's like, well, Tennessee's back and they got this great offense and they're going to go in there and Nico and Dylan Sampson and more Nico. But there is this idea that we've said that for games in the past before, for road games, and they haven't really worked out that way. So I think, to me, there's not really too many components of Oklahoma's team that scares me. Yes, it is going to be a hostile environment. That is going to be a challenge. But I think this is going to be an opportunity for Josh Heupel to step up and say, hey, no, I can take this offense into challenging games. That's not Lexington, Kentucky, and we can go up there and put our own points on the board. So what do you guys think of that? Do you guys see that as one of the big sort of final challenges for this Tennessee team as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a fair question. And, a worrisome thing, I guess, if you're Tennessee. If Tennessee loses, that was actually something I had coming in, and I didn't mention. Is like, yeah, they just don't handle the stage and the environment well. I think that's fair. I think there's just so many factors to go around all of it. Like, I think it's a fair question. I don't think it's a fair
Yes.
conclusion to say Tennessee just struggles on the road. Like, let's go look at last year, for instance. One, I don't know, y'all were there. Y'all tell me. I don't think Fairfield Field's a hostile environment. So, okay, but
Not
Tennessee's
particularly.
offense didn't do anything against Texas A&M. They didn't do anything against Georgia at home. Tennessee's offense wasn't very good last year. That's why Tennessee's offense didn't do very good on the road last year. Is Tennessee didn't have a very good offense, and they didn't do good at home when they played competent defenses either. 2 years ago, the South Carolina game, Tennessee played bad at South Carolina. Tennessee's offense was good. Tennessee's offense would have scored 45 points if Hendon Hooker didn't get hurt in that game. Not the reason they lost the game in the slightest. It was because their defense couldn't get a stop. Georgia's the best team in the country, best defense in the country. I think the environment 100% did have an effect on that game. It's one of the best environments I've ever been at that day in Sanford Stadium. But I think at the same time, Georgia's defense was elite and presented test that Tennessee hadn't seen to that point. So, yes, I think it's a fair question. Yes, I think sometimes it's oversimplified because there's a lot of other factors that I think have gone into some of these things. And, Tennessee's offense, I know it's an 11 o'clock game. Tennessee's offense played great against LSU a few years ago. Heck, they played great for 3 quarters in 2021 at Alabama. And really played better than the final score looked in that game too. So, I think, yes, it's a question. Yes, Tennessee's offense has generally been worse, but I think also a lot of factors besides the environment have gone into a lot of these games and had an impact on how the game ended up.
Hey, and also, what does Tennessee have more of now than they did not have last year and certainly did not have in 2022 that I do think, helps in these situations? It's just depth, and it's talented depth as well. Tennessee's not going to be in a situation where, on the defensive, like you were talking about earlier, right? There's not going to be one guy playing, 70 snaps for Tennessee on the defensive line. There's not going to be, 3 wide receivers that are tasked to run every single route throughout the game. I think that Tennessee's got some more pieces to work with. Hopefully that gives them a little bit more fresh legs going onto the field as well, in case that has an impact. But yeah, Jack, what about you? What do you think of this?
Yeah, it's important. And Tennessee's really only played great on the road once. True road game, and it's LSU in the Heupel era.
God, they just blitzed them.
In a place that is like intimidating, I should say, because Missouri in 21, blitzed them. Kentucky last year played, but Kentucky 21 offense played great. So there's been times, but really that LSU game is the only one you look to and say, wow, from what Tennessee did on the road. Outside of that, it's been an eyesore for the Josh Heupel era. Florida last year was just unacceptable, getting dominated by Georgia in 22, as Ryan mentioned. So it's a big part of this game. And say what you will, but a night game it brings everybody, it amps up everybody that much more, and it becomes that much more difficult.
Yeah.
So
that's why my answer.
Yeah, I was going to say what I was going to bring up last on this podcast was what's the headline if Tennessee wins or loses? I feel like if Tennessee loses, it's the road game thing. It's the road game factor. That's the headline about Josh Heupel and this Tennessee team. If the Vols lose to the Sooners, is that Tennessee still can't play on the road. Can't win big games.
I think in Knoxville it is. Yeah, I don't know if nationally it necessarily is, but in Knoxville I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think if Tennessee loses, go ahead, Ryan.
You got it, Rick.
No, go ahead. I'm thinking of mine.
Tennessee wins, Ryan. What?
I think it's assuming that they look good on offense. I think or solid on offense. I think it's nationally that this is a team that its first 3 weeks wasn't misleading. That this is a team that is one of the 5, 6, 7 best in the country and can compete to win a national championship. And probably, actually, I'll say this: it's that Tennessee's defense has them as a national title contender. That will be the narrative, because Tennessee's defense is going to play well in this game. I think either way, but if they win, certainly the defense is going to play well. And I think people are going to be saying, 22 Tennessee was great. They had an awesome offense, but they were never a serious national title contender with the defense they had. I think people will say this offense will continue to grow with a young quarterback. it's a Josh Heupel offense. You know it's going to be good. You know it's going to be explosive. But this time they had the defense to stand beside it and make them a real threat to be one of the best teams in the entire sport.
Yeah, I think Tennessee beats Oklahoma this weekend. You have a lot of the people who were high on Tennessee before the season. I think they are not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not. I think they're validated in their opinion about Tennessee being good. And I think for the people who are saying, hey, I believe that this team can obviously score points. I'm seeing it on the field, but I want to see them against an opponent from their own conference. I want to see them against a truly ranked opponent. I think those people would be saying, hey, now I can officially and confidently slate Tennessee in that top 5 of teams, top tier of teams. And I think that if Tennessee loses, I think most people are looking at Tennessee across the national landscape as, okay, that's a challenging game. Maybe Tennessee folded. Maybe they just didn't play good. Maybe Oklahoma stood on their head. But I still think that people are looking at Tennessee as a top 12 team in this country. I think they'll have a little bit maybe more respect for Oklahoma coming out of it. But I don't think that the wheels fall off for Tennessee in this game if they do lose. I think that you've obviously now you got to go win some more games. Now you've got to make this climb again. But I think that if Tennessee wins, a lot of people will be validated in their idea that Tennessee is one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, if Tennessee loses, I think it goes back to what the narrative was before the season about this team, that this is a first 4 out in the playoff team. Sure, they can make the playoff. It wouldn't be a big surprise. But I don't think this team's going to make the playoff. This team's going to play in the Citrus Bowl again. I think that'll be the narrative if they lose.
Missouri probably more likely to finish. And yeah.
I think if they win, it's all right. This team's definitely going to make the playoff. This team can maybe even win the national championship.
Mm-hmm. Right. I just don't see Tennessee falling flat on its face in this game. But Nico could obviously struggle. Like if Tennessee loses, I think it's pretty low scoring. The under's hitting. So the Tennessee narrative, if they lose, would be maybe everyone got ahead of themselves with Nico. But really, I think a lot of it would just be Oklahoma focused and that Oklahoma is legit if Tennessee loses. I feel like that would be where the attention goes, which is how it should be. Most of the time it's not. It's on the loser, but it feels like the attention will be on the winner of this game no matter what, rather than the loser.
It'll be a very impressive win for Oakland. It'll be a very impressive win for whoever walks off that field as the winner at 11:30, 10:30 Central.
Well, you guys talked about how if Tennessee wins, it's that the defense makes this a national championship contender. I'm already there. I think you guys know that. So I'm picking Tennessee in this game by 2 scores. Not that we have to give specific score predictions right now, but Rick, where's your where are you thinking? What are you thinking on this game at this moment here on Wednesday morning?
Well, famously, I went into this season picking Tennessee as a loss in this game, and we talked about it last week that I thought that Tennessee had been playing better than I thought, and I also thought that Oklahoma had struggled more than I thought. Oklahoma's gotten some injuries here in these first couple games, so I am very confidently. Very tough, but I'm confidently picking Tennessee. I do think that Oklahoma covers, and I think that, again, to kind of wrap up the narrative we just talked about, I think that this is the game where people in Knoxville, people have been really following this team for the last 3 or 4 years, this is where they say, okay, maybe don't have those road troubles anymore. This is a legitimate team. So I think that Tennessee wins. I think that Oklahoma covers. But yeah, my opinion has strongly changed. And after the first 3 weeks of the season, Tennessee has looked better and Oklahoma has not looked as good as I thought. So I'm flipping to a Tennessee win.
Ryan, where are you at right now?
Yeah, no, I think Tennessee wins. The road stuff does worry me. The Nico, big game stuff, I'd say less worries me. It gives me cause for concern, but I'll go back to what I've said on this podcast before, what I said in the season prediction, what I'll probably say more times this season. To me, football comes down to the line of scrimmage play and quarterback play. I think Tennessee's better at quarterback. I think Tennessee's defensive line versus Oklahoma's offensive line is a just behemoth advantage in Tennessee's side. And I think Oklahoma's defensive line versus Tennessee's offensive line is slight Oklahoma advantage, close to a push, pretty narrow. And I just think when you look at those 3 things, I'm just going to roll with the logic and what my head tells me, which is that Tennessee wins this game by, 10 points, something like that.
Fair point. I got Tennessee by 14, could be up to 17 by the time we do our predictions. Much better team is where I'm at right now.
If you put these 2 teams on a neutral site, I think I'd be right in that same boat. And I'm not even picking a closer game because I do feel like, the hostile road environment thing. But I do think that'll play. But yeah, neutral site, like when you're just talking about 11 on 11, I think that Tennessee is a good bit better, but we'll figure out how it all balances out.
There you go. That'll wrap it up for this RTI Press Pass podcast here on this Wednesday, previewing Tennessee, Oklahoma. It's going to be a doozy. Game day is there for the Saturday night matchup.
We will be there. We will be there. So make sure you're
Rick,
following along.
Rick will be there. RockyTopInsider.com for all your coverage needs, at Rocky Top Insider on all social platforms. Big game crew this weekend, by the way, to call in the game with Kirk and Fowler and Holly Rowe. So, hey, it doesn't get much bigger than this. It's the marquee game of week 4. I think everybody's looking forward to it. You can follow Rick at Rick Butler on X. Ryan's at rshump00. That's SCHUMP. You can also follow me at Jack Foster Media. But until next time, we'll see you and have a great weekend.